I thought I was engaged, but then her ex-fiance came back from the dead. This is my first time sharing anything like this. A buddy of mine suggested that I could use this space to vent into the void. My name's Brian, I'm 35, and I was engaged to my amazing fiancée, Sarah, who's 30. We met almost 4 years ago at a Starbucks. I saw her struggling with her kid in the line, so I decided to just pay for her coffee and muffin. I didn't think much would come from it, but we started talking. I noticed she wasn't wearing a wedding ring, so I figured I'd take a shot. I didn't want to come off weird, so I just gave her my business card and said, "No pressure," thinking if she was married, she'd just toss it. You can imagine how thrilled I was when she actually called me the next day. Things moved fast between us, and honestly, I fell hard right from the start. Sarah had some baggage though. I was her first serious relationship since her fiancé had gone missing almost 2 years before. I totally got it. I've been through loss too. I buried the love of my life. Back in college, I was with a girl named Lauren for 5 years. We were engaged, but she was tragically taken from me in a car accident. It took me 2 long years to even start moving on, and to be real, I'm still not over it. Sarah wasn't the first person I dated after Lauren, but she was the first to reignite that spark in me. After a few months, I officially met her son Jason. He's the sweetest kid, and we hit it off right away. Before long, they moved in with me, and I just knew that this was what I wanted for my life. But Sarah was still haunted by the loss of her fiancé Adam. He had gone on a guy's trip to Thailand and just never came back. They assumed he was dead. I did everything I could to help her through that grief. I was there when she cried after our first kiss because it felt so different. I was patient while she worked through being intimate with someone new. On her bad days, I was there to hold her hand, and we celebrated the good ones together. I understood what she was going through and didn't want her to feel alone like I did after my loss. We were engaged for about 2 months when things took a sharp turn. Out of nowhere, her ex-fiancé, Adam, came back. He had been gone for almost 5 years when his father, who Sarah is still close with, came to our house to tell us Adam was alive. Apparently, he'd been stuck in a Cambodian prison. The story didn't really add up to me. Like, how do you just get lost in the system for that long? And no phone call ever? I mean, maybe in the 1969, but not in 2019. I brought it up to Sarah once, but she didn't want to talk about it. At first, I tried to be supportive. I could understand the guilt she and her family were feeling for giving up on him. They even had a memorial service for him. I was honestly relieved when Sarah didn't want to rush into seeing him right away. The first time I met Adam, something about him rubbed me the wrong way. I kept that to myself, but made an effort to show I cared about what was best for Sarah and Jason. I even got him a job with my brother, Mike. I didn't want to deny him the chance to be in his son's life, but I also needed him to understand that his return was going to be tough for everyone who had moved on. We were civil, but I admit, I probably overplayed the nice guy role, especially since I'm pretty sure he was muttering curses under his breath. Things started to fall apart after they met in person. My whole life, I've always tried to be the bigger person, except maybe that one time in high school. But watching Sarah have what was basically an emotional affair right in front of me for 4 months was pushing it. I get that he's Jason's father, but they got way too close way too fast. Every time I brought up my concerns, she'd brush it off, saying it was just natural for them to be close since they'd been together for so long before he disappeared. She'd reassure me, saying there was nothing romantic going on anymore and that she was with me, not him. I bought into it for way too long. Then, at our bachelor/bachelorette party, I saw them almost kiss. That's when I realized the emotional affair wasn't going to stay just that for long. It was bound to get physical if I didn't do something. The next morning, 6 days before our wedding, I decided to confront her. I asked her if she was falling back in love with Adam. She seemed caught off guard for a second before admitting, "I never completely stopped loving him. A part of me always will. We didn't break up because of something we did wrong. It was just the circumstances. But I've told you, there's nothing more between us." I pressed on. "I saw what happened last night. I know you both thought I came in after, but I saw you dancing and I saw you almost kiss. I just need to know, do you want him more than you want me?" Tears welled up in her eyes as she replied, "No. I made a commitment to you and I'm not going back on it. Of course, there are still feelings. How could there not be? "But I love you too." That didn't really comfort me. That doesn't exactly fill me with confidence. It sounds more like you're staying with me because you feel obligated, not because you love me. She got defensive then. "I do love you, that's why I'm marrying you." I stayed calm and asked her one last thing. "When you picture yourself walking down the aisle, who do you see waiting for you at the end?" She started crying even harder. "I'm sorry, it's just so hard now that he's back." I replied, "I know. I understand what it's like to lose someone, but I can't imagine what it's like to get them back. That must be really tough." Sarah cut in, "It's impossible. I just can't control how I feel. I'm so sorry." I held her close. "If you want to be with him, you have to tell me now. It's going to be so much harder after next week. All I want is for you to be happy, with no regrets. So, do you want to be with him?" She just nodded, tears streaming down her face, and sobbed even harder. I couldn't hold it in either. It was one of the most painful moments I've ever lived through. We talked about fairness, and for a brief moment, she hesitated on her decision, but in the end, she chose him. I could tell a weight had lifted off her shoulders. She started packing her things. I asked her if I could still be in Jason's life, and she told me that would make her so happy. Before she left for good, I told her I loved her and to take care of herself. Then I added, "I know you probably don't want to hear this, but that whole prison story has never sat right with me. Just promise me you'll be careful." She gave me a quick nod, turned, and walked out. I completely fell apart. After she left, I had the dreaded task of telling my family, who adored Sarah, and dealing with the financial mess of getting as much of our wedding deposits back as I could. My brother Mike was furious. He wanted to fire Adam. I asked him not to. I told him that Adam would need to provide for Jason now. Mike eventually calmed down and said he'd call our friend Lee to see if he could find Adam a job. The day after, Sarah's dad, who I was pretty close with, came by. We'd always had a good relationship. He wanted to make things right, but I also knew he was hoping to see his son marry Sarah. When he offered to cover the cost of all the wedding cancellations, I realized what he was doing. He was giving them a chance to get married. Part of me wanted to tell him to shove it, but I didn't. I kept being the bigger person, just like always, letting it slide. Sarah came back later that week to get the rest of her things and told me they were planning to get married. That was 9 months ago. I've seen their social media posts. They act like the perfect couple. People comment on how happy they are, talking about how it was meant to be, how some divine force brought him back from his imprisonment to reunite them. Then, just this week, they announced that Sarah is pregnant. Hardly anyone from our mutual circle has reached out to me. It feels like they've forgotten that I'm a person too. I guess because I didn't make a scene, everyone assumes I'm okay with everything. I feel betrayed and shattered. My first girlfriend cheated on me, my second love died, and now I've lost my fiance to true love. This house that once held dreams for the future now feels like a place where I just wallow in self-pity. I've only seen Jason twice since all this happened, and both times were in that first month. After that, they slowly started pushing me out of their lives. That's been the hardest part of all. I miss my little buddy. He used to call me Dad. Every night, he'd sit on my lap while I read him a story from his 5-minute Marvel book. He'd fall asleep on me, and I'd carry him to bed. You can't just turn that off. I miss him so much. I can't wrap my head around it. How is this fair? I didn't cheat. I didn't yell. I treated her with love and respect, yet somehow I feel like I'm seen as the bad guy. How am I the one who deserves to be punished here? All I wanted was to raise Jason like he was my own, to love his mom and wake up next to her every morning, and to give them the best life I could. Where's the justice in any of this? I don't expect anyone to feel sorry for me. We all have our own losses. But I needed to get this off my chest. I did something recently. I wasn't the bigger man this time. I didn't walk away quietly or smooth things over. It's been 9 years since I last logged into this account, which I used only once. I won't go into what happened before, but I used the search feature and found that someone named u/John_Travis_A_WBC had put together a BORU of all the posts about my situation. I had no idea Adam or Sarah had ever posted about it, so reading their perspectives was both enlightening and infuriating. I wasn't surprised by Adam's post that started this whole mess. It was the same nonsensical garbage he spouted back then. I always knew something was off with him. But it was Sarah's post from a few years ago that really made my blood boil. Adam was a liar and a sleazeball. He wrecked my life back then out of selfishness. I never saw Jason again. It took me a long time to get over Sarah, and all for nothing. Adam never even stopped being a sleazeball. When I found out he was hurting their children out of pure spite, that was enough for me to let go of any lingering feelings I had for her. I read through his Reddit posts, where he'd brag in forums like petty revenge and legal advice. He always portrayed himself as the victim somehow. He boasted about dragging out his divorce for 2 years, racking up legal fees for his ex. He sabotaged the sale of their home just because he didn't need the money. He even admitted to dragging out custody hearings and child support agreements, violating them and challenging them, all to make her life harder. I messaged Adam on Reddit and picked a fight. I told him exactly who I was and reminded him of the past, using personal details only he'd recognize. I called him by his real name, not his ridiculous handle. He got personal too, calling me by my name, and never corrected me for using Adam. After that, I reached out to Sarah via email. Her response was oddly upbeat, like nothing had happened. She seemed genuinely interested in hearing about what I've been up to over the last 9 years. I cut straight to the point with Sarah and let her know I wasn't interested in catching up. Instead, I sent her pages of screenshots and downloads of all the posts Adam had made, including our conversation. I wanted to make it clear that Grando US 2020 was Adam, and I had solid proof that he was intentionally causing problems out of spite, which was dragging out their legal issues. After that, I told Sarah I didn't want to keep in touch anymore and blocked her. Apparently it worked, because about 10 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon, Adam stormed into my print shop. Only one other person was in the office with me, Amelia, while the college kids I hired were in the back running the machines and blasting music. Adam started swearing at me, going off, and then got right up in my face, jabbing his fingers into my chest. He even threatened to kick my ass. Amelia said she was going to call the cops, but I told her, "Don't worry, I've got this." At that moment, 25 years of holding back and turning the other cheek just snapped. See, my brother and I grew up in a boxing household. Our dad loved the sport and had us in boxing classes from a young age. We stayed in it all the way through high school. Even after that, Kyle and I would still spar now and then to keep sharp. Back in high school, I was your typical popular kid. Smart, well-liked, and a 3-sport athlete: football, wrestling, and baseball. I had a girlfriend since middle school, and we were each other's first everything. Senior year, I was the starting quarterback on the team, and we were having a solid season. We also had 2 teammates, Will and Bob, who were both really talented and getting recruited by some Division II schools. The thing was, they were 2 of the biggest jerks I had ever met. They were always pulling mean pranks, talking trash, and trying to hook up with the girlfriends of guys they didn't like. Total D-bags. They thought they were invincible, but you could tell they'd never been in a real fight. As it turns out, heading into senior year, my girlfriend was starting to feel like she was wasting her youth by staying with me. I could have handled it if she had just broken up with me, but instead, she decided to start exploring without telling me. The night after our first win, there was a house party. I wasn't planning on going because I had work at the movie theater that night. Then I got a call from a friend saying my girlfriend was seen making out with Will and that they had just gone into one of the bedrooms together. In a knee-jerk reaction, I bailed on work and headed straight to the party. When I walked in, everyone's eyes were on me. Some people looked uncomfortable, like they knew something was about to go down, while others were laughing and whispering. Bob blocked me from going down the hall, and we started arguing when Will came out, wearing nothing but compression shorts. They both tried to intimidate me, standing over me and threatening to beat me up if I didn't leave. I turned and headed for the front door. They started calling me names and putting on a show, trying to humiliate me in front of everyone. People laughed, and the comments got worse. Once I got outside, I called Kyle. He showed up in about 10 minutes. When we walked back into the party, Will and Bob were standing in the middle of the room, and my girlfriend was right there with them. As soon as she saw us, she turned and ran out. I'll never forget the look of shock on Will and Bob's faces when we approached them. We didn't say a word. We just shoved them against the wall and gave them the universal "come on" gesture. I could see the fear in their eyes. These guys had built their whole reputation on being tough, but deep down, they were just bullies who picked on easy targets, and now they were facing two guys who weren't as big or strong, but who were ready to throw down. They had no choice but to fight us. There were a couple dozen people watching, and backing down wasn't an option if they wanted to keep their tough guy image. When they finally charged at us, it wasn't even a fight. It was a beatdown. Will ended up with a broken jaw, and Kyle cracked Bob's ribs. They both missed a few weeks of the season, and when the colleges called to ask about their injuries, it didn't take long for them to hear about the fight. The recruiting calls stopped. We always wondered if the cops would get involved, but they never did. Our dad gave us one hell of a lecture, though. It stuck with me ever since. Those guys were jerks, but in hindsight, I felt like I had taken their future away from them. They came from rough homes and were just scared kids trying to act tough. They never went to college, and even 25 years later, they're still stuck in our hometown, never really doing anything with their lives. I've spent years being the bigger person, but now here I was face to face with the one person I truly despised. When Adam got up in my face, threatening me, I shoved him back. He stepped forward again, and that's when he met my quick jab followed by a hard right hook. He hit the floor like a fish out of water, flopping around, trying to get up but too woozy to steady himself. Amelia walked over, and that's when he started tearing up. We helped him to his car, put him in the driver's seat, and about 7 minutes later, he finally drove off. Honestly, I don't feel bad about it. In fact, I feel great. I've been wanting to do that for almost 10 years, and now I'm only kicking myself for not doing it sooner. A few days later, I got an email from Sarah. She had created a new email account. I didn't even read it, just blocked her again. But then she did it a second time. This time I decided to read it. It was a somewhat long email thanking me for my help, apologizing for her choices, yeah, I bet she is, and suggesting we meet up to catch up and show her appreciation for what I did with her ex. That's the general gist, though it wasn't exactly worded that way. I showed it to Amelia and she immediately said, "There's no doubt in my mind that Sarah wants to get back together with you. The tone is definitely flirty." She asked me what I thought about it. I told her, "I'd rather cut off my own feet. I'm just going to block her again." Amelia laughed and suggested, "She's not going to get the hint anytime soon. Maybe you should meet her, make it crystal clear you're not interested, and hey, it gives you a little more practice at being petty." She said the last part with a grin. I decided to take Amelia's advice. I responded to Sarah's email, agreeing to a one-time friendly meetup. She asked if the next day would work, and I said sure. She suggested we meet at noon at the Starbucks on Spring Mill RD, the same Starbucks where we first met all those years ago. I told her under no circumstances was she to bring Jason, and she promised she wouldn't. She stuck to that because if she hadn't, I would have walked right out. I arrived before she did, grabbed a drink, and found a table. When she walked in, she came over and went in for a hug. I rejected it and offered a handshake instead. She looked a little hurt, and for a second, I questioned my decision. She excused herself to grab a drink and then returned to the table. I just sat there, waiting for her to speak first. She finally broke the silence. "You look really good." "Thanks," I replied. "I hit the bags with the MMA guys sometimes." She seemed surprised. "I thought you were into boxing." A little annoyed with the small talk, I said, "I am, but the MMA gym is close to my house and they train boxing too, but I doubt that's why you wanted to meet." She started telling me about what she'd learned about Adam, but I cut her off and told her I already knew. I also mentioned how he had attacked me about a year ago. Then came the part Amelia had warned me about. "I'm really sorry for what happened between us," Sarah said. "I made a huge mistake. I let this Hollywood idea of lost love cloud my judgment. It was a traumatic time for me, but I realize now how wrong I was. I was hoping you could find it in your heart to forgive me, or at least give me a chance to earn that forgiveness." I responded flatly, "I got over all that a long time ago. My issue was always with Adam, not you. I'm glad your situation worked out, but I helped for your kids, not for you." Then she got more direct. "I just have this feeling that there's still something between us. I've regretted losing you for a long time now, and I just feel like fate brought us back together. I mean, what are the odds you'd find those Reddit posts? It feels like the universe is trying to reunite us." I was about to respond when Amelia showed up, right on cue. She had been listening through the speakerphone. She walked in, smiled at me, and said, "Hey Brian, ready to go?" Then she gave me a kiss that lasted a little longer than your average public display of affection. Amelia turned to Sarah and extended her hand. "You must be his ex-fiancée, Sarah." Sarah, clearly irritated, responded, "Yeah, Brian didn't mention he was seeing anyone. I guess he's into younger women now." She said it like it was meant to sting. Amelia just laughed and said, "Oh, sweetie, thanks for the compliment, but I'm actually 39 and a mom of 2. I don't get called young very often, so I'll take it. Also, I'm his wife. We've been married for 7 years now." She posed in a way that highlighted her incredible figure. Sarah looked shocked. "Brian, why didn't you tell me you were married?" I stood up, ready to leave with my wife. "You never asked. And besides, I wanted you to know no one was waiting around for you." With that, we walked out. I realize now that I never mentioned it in my original post either. I met Amelia about a year after my engagement with Sarah ended. We've been married almost 7 years now. Amelia's just rounding up a bit. We have a 5-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old stepson from her previous marriage. His dad is a great guy, not a jerk, and we get along really well. My stepson calls me Brian, and he probably always will, but we have an awesome relationship that I wouldn't trade for anything. When we got back into the car, Amelia looked at me and said, "See, it's fun to be petty sometimes." I just nodded, thinking to myself, yeah, it really was. I haven't gotten another email from Sarah, so I'm guessing she finally got the hint.